Hello and welcome to Spill the Tea. True Stories, the place where real life is more fascinating than fiction. Sit back, pour yourself a cup of tea, and let's dive into the moments that stay with us forever. We're starting now. Sarah caught the tired, quick glances of the two Mrs. Davisons, Tom's teacher and the school principal, Mrs. Davison. In those glances, it seemed, a silent agreement was read. Just a little longer, and this simple-minded mother will leave. What, after all, can you expect from her? Sarah's heart squeezed with confusion. Words stuck in her throat. She couldn't pull herself together. So far away. Is there really no boarding school closer? I won't be able to visit him every day after work. I simply won't make the last bus. Mrs. Davison, the principal, spoke softly, as if to a slow child. Ms. Adams, a boarding school does not imply daily parental visits. You will be able to pick Tom up on Saturday and bring him home for the weekend. And for holidays, of course. I will help you fill out the application for the allowance. As a single mother with a low income, you are entitled to benefits. Believe me, for Tom, this is the best solution. However much Sarah told herself to hold on, not to give way to her feelings, her eyes treacherously filled with heavy, hot moisture. And now these silly, inappropriate tears were already flowing down her cheeks. Her mascara had probably run, and now she looked utterly pathetic. Mrs. Peterson, Tom's teacher, with genuine concern, offered her a crumpled napkin from the school cafeteria and sat down next to her. "Sweetie dear, let's talk off the record, okay? Mrs. Davison, do you mind? Thank you. It will probably be easier this way. For Tom, this is truly a chance. Don't think that a boarding school is necessarily a shelter for children from troubled families. Those are prejudices. It's just that sometimes life turns out in such a way that this becomes the best option for a child. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. This boarding school is very decent, not just on paper. I have a friend who works there as a cook. She sees everything from the inside. The atmosphere is good. No horrors, no fights. The teaching staff is close-knit. And the main thing is English. The teacher there is strong, knows how to captivate. For Tom, with his abilities, this is invaluable. He's an extraordinary boy, your son. I've been in school for 25 years, Sarah. Believe my experience. He won't get that level of education in our school. Forgive me, Mrs. Davison. She nodded to the principal, who merely sighed dryly. You simply can't entice specialists of that level here. Who would come here? Exactly. Mrs. Peterson nodded towards the principal. Sarah, it's a bitter truth, but it's the truth. Think about Tom's future. He'll grow up and understand. He'll thank you for giving him this chance, this opportunity to build a different life. Nowadays, you can't get anywhere without a language, and with a language, the prospects are completely different, the salaries are different. Well, I see you've calmed down a bit and are listening to me. Forgive me, I just couldn't control my nerves. Sarah hastily wiped her hot cheeks with the crumpled napkin and wadded it up, throwing it under the table. I just don't know how to tell Tom about this. What if he decides I want to get rid of him? What if he grows up and reproaches me? You sent me away so your life would be easier. We've already taken care of that, haven't we, Mrs. Davison? Mrs. Peterson beamed, pleased with herself. I've already spoken to Tom twice, Sarah, and there's nothing to worry about. He's not at all against studying in the city if he can come home for the weekend. He's interested in everything new. For his age, it's a real adventure. Although he's calm and diligent, he's not timid. He's a guy with ambitions. He wants to achieve a lot. You're raising such a son, Ms. Adams. You'll be proud of him. That conversation seemed like ages ago. And now graduation was approaching. All the details were promised at the pre-New Year meeting. Sarah had been saving a little from each paycheck for this day for a year and a half, dreaming of giving Tom a real celebration. And if it wasn't enough, Nancy, her loyal friend, promised to help out. She just needed to find out the exact amount of the collection to calculate how much would be left for Tom's suit and shoes. And of course, some kind of gift from herself. at least for the class teacher. Nan, what do you think we should give? Flowers, chocolates, maybe cognac? Sarah asked Nancy, as she was more experienced in such matters. Cognac, my dear fool! Nancy threw her head back and burst out laughing. You're not giving a thank you gift to a doctor after being discharged. Don't worry, it's all standard. You'll hand over the money to the committee, they'll buy everything themselves. Better think about yourself. Buy yourself something for graduation. When was the last time you bought something for yourself? Looking at you, it's as if they don't pay you at the post office. Everything for Tommy, everything for her son. That's right, of course. But you can't completely forget about yourself. I'm 10 years older than you, Sar, and I feel like a girl and pamper myself sometimes. And you're only 35. You're still young, and you've already signed up to be an old aunt. It seemed Nancy could go without food as long as she had the opportunity to lecture someone about life. Usually, that someone was Sarah. But Nancy wasn't just a fount of unsolicited advice. She never refused to help if it came down to real need. As for spending on herself, it was easy for Nancy to talk. She had a husband, albeit with a small but stable salary at the tractor station. Her adult daughter and son-in-law lived in a big city, stood on their own 2 feet, and even sometimes helped their parents. It was useless to remind Nancy how she herself had dressed Daisy when she went to college in the city. She didn't want her daughter to look poor either. She didn't want to. For almost 8 years now, since the 4th grade, her son had been studying at the city boarding school. Kind Mrs. Peterson, who still taught at their Camishan school, had been right. In Tom's class, there were only 2 children from poor families, and Tom was one of them. The others were there for various reasons. Some were dumped on a new husband, even if he wasn't poor. Some single or divorced mother was torn between 2 jobs or trying to start her own business and was afraid to leave her child unsupervised. And who knows how many destinies. Each had their own story, and judging from the outside was the easiest thing to do. Some parents seemed to buy off their children with expensive gifts, didn't pick them up every weekend, but gave them fancy phones or game consoles. Tom told her. Sarah never asked if he was okay with such compensation, afraid to hear the truth. The main thing was that her son seemed happy to come home, and for that, she was grateful. She went out of her way to make sure he didn't feel deprived in any way. It wasn't his fault that his mother was an orphan from birth and was raising him alone. Sarah tried. First there were simple toys, then the game console Tom dreamed of, a player, a phone, shoes, clothes. She knew it was all very basic, but with her postal operator's salary, she already had to stretch to buy anything beyond the bare necessities. There was absolutely nothing left for herself, and Sarah tried simply not to think about it. What was the point of agonizing and walking around with a sour face? It wouldn't add money. Nancy triumphantly read aloud from some magazine, "Negative emotions are detrimental to health." "See, I always knew that," she exclaimed. "My mother always said, 'Forget everything, save your nerves.' And now scientists have confirmed it. Look at that British ones. Sometimes they research such nonsense that it's obvious without them, and they probably rake in money. They rewrite a basic truth in scientific language and go to their canaries. Look, it even rhymed. But we won't envy them. We don't care about their earnings. Let's throw all this garbage out of our heads and be healthy." Sarah completely agreed. Whining wouldn't help matters, nor would it add health. So she affectionately called her boots, which were already 10 years old, her jubilees, and tried to look at them without a hint of sadness. Not long ago, before every weekend and holiday, Sarah herself would travel to the city to pick Tom up from the boarding school. She loved these trips home, when they sat side by side on the bus. She would put her arm around his shoulders, they would chat endlessly about everything, and somewhere halfway, Tom would quiet down and fall asleep. And Sarah, holding him closer, would listen to his quiet breathing. But for 3 years now, Tom had been traveling home alone. "Mom, I'm in 8th grade now. I can take the bus to Camishin myself, Tom said. And one ticket is cheaper. You always talk about saving money. Look at you, you sly one. Found an excuse, invoked economy. You've grown up completely. Sarah laughed, ruffling his hair. You could just say you're embarrassed to travel with your mom, like a little kid. Of course, he had grown up. He wanted to be independent. It made her a little sad. Here it was, that time when you were almost no longer needed. And soon, probably, you would stop being needed altogether. You should be happy, Nancy declared unequivocally, hearing her sad thoughts. You've almost raised the boy. He'll start earning money himself soon. And things will get easier for you. You'll finally be able to breathe, relax, and afford something for yourself. Sarah understood that her friend was right, but for some reason, she couldn't feel happy. The parents' meeting at the boarding school was scheduled a week before the New Year holidays. Tom stayed to finish studying, and Sarah was traveling home to the village on the last evening bus, alone. There was a kind of confusion in her soul. Graduation, it turned out, would cost more than she had anticipated. In Camishin, they collected much less for school celebrations. Most parents there barely made ends meet. Unless someone's husband earned well on rotation work, or someone kept livestock and traded meat. The amount she had saved for a year and a half just in case, she withdrew from her salary and took with her. But now, no matter how she calculated, it would only be enough for Tom's suit and shoes. And she had nothing to wear to go see her son. Well, maybe something would come up in 6 months. She could borrow a dress, but shoes were more difficult. But really, all this was such a trifle. The main thing was that her Tom had won the district English Olympiad, and he was good at exact sciences, only chemistry and biology lagged. He didn't have a knack for them, and the other teachers couldn't praise him enough. She wondered who he took after. Sarah herself hadn't been a great student, and Michael, Tom's father, hadn't exactly been a star either. And there was no one with a decent education in their families. Tom would be the first. Better not to think about it, so as not to jinx it. Sarah and Nancy had a backup plan. When Tom got into institute, he could live in the city with Nancy's cousin. The aunt had agreed to rent him a room for almost a symbolic fee, provided the lodger helped her around the house, carrying bags from the store, walking the dog in bad weather. Her own son lived in Moscow, and she was often ill and complained that it was very difficult without help. As long as the aunt didn't change her mind and suddenly ask for a high price. Wake up, miss. We've arrived in dear old Camishin. The conductress gently touched her shoulder. Oh, excuse me. Thank you. I'm probably holding things up? Sarah grabbed her bag and almost jumped off the bus, not fully awake. Good woman, the conductress said after the departing Sarah, as if addressing the empty bus. She liked gossiping about passengers when there weren't many people. Her son is in the city, studying at a boarding school. She's proud of him. The boy seems smart. She's all about him. Lives only for him. Raising him alone. Did you see the jacket she wears? And her boots are about to fall apart. She's neat. She tries. But poverty can't be hidden. And she's pretty. If you dressed her up, our whole bus fleet would turn their heads. I'm telling you this for sure. Oh well. A week later, as the small team at the Camishin post office bustled, preparing to set a modest pre-New Year table, Nancy literally flew into the office. You could always tell if something extraordinary had happened with her. She instantly became serious and focused. Now even her usually rosy cheeks seemed pale, her eyes wide, and an uncharacteristic confusion was frozen in them. Sarah, hi. Put that jar of tomatoes down for a minute. I just found out something. By chance. From Tony, he works at the roadside cafe on the highway, you know, where he's the cashier, bartender, and waiter. The cafe is popular with truckers and loggers. Anyway, Tony told me. Michael. He died. Passed away. Drunk, he climbed out of the steam room into an ice hole, in such cold, and his heart couldn't take it. I didn't ask for details, and Tony probably doesn't know them himself. I didn't even know Tony had kept in touch with Michael all these years, calling and writing. But Tony said yesterday they were commemorating his friend. That's how it is. Had one drink, and the person is gone. He was still so young. Who knew his heart was weak? Sarah, for some reason, picked up the heavy 3-liter jar of tomatoes again, and quietly, almost in a whisper, called out to her boss, "Ms. Miller, I probably won't be able to stay for the office party. Really, I can't. Forgive me and the girls." "What happened, Sarita?" "Tom's father died," Nancy answered for her friend. "Oh," Ms. Miller exhaled. She wanted to say something, but just waved her hand and suddenly suggested, "Stay, both of you girls. We can commemorate him together. Why sit alone, grieving, dwelling on things? We're family here. If you want to talk, we'll listen." "Really, stay, Sarah," Nancy supported. "But I can't." Nancy spread her hands. "My husband is waiting at home, worried he won't make the aspic without me. And we have guests for New Year. I'd ditch this aspic right now, with something like this happening, but then he'll nag me for 2 weeks about chatting with friends while neglecting the household. So thank you, Ms. Miller. Keep an eye on things here. And tomorrow Tom arrives, and things will immediately feel better. Life is like that. What can you do? It goes on." In the morning, Sarah blamed herself for going to Nancy's after the gathering at the post office instead of going home. She wasn't at all used to drinking, maybe just a glass of champagne on New Year's or a shot of liqueur on a birthday. She didn't know her limit at all. And here she and Nancy had spent the whole evening reminiscing about the past, their youth, her love for Michael. And Nancy's husband Alex, upon learning what had happened, brought out a bottle of cherry tincture. Alex made the tinctures himself, and they were treacherous, tasted like juice, easy to drink, but then your legs wouldn't hold you, even if your head was clear. Alex had one shot with them for Michael and quietly withdrew, leaving them alone. And they stayed up well past midnight. Only then did Sarah understand. All these years she had kept the promise she made to herself, not to remember or even think about Michael. But today, she could. She even had to, especially since she trusted Nancy completely and wasn't ashamed of her most intimate memories in front of her. Michael appeared in their class in the last year of school. He came with his father, George, a drilling foreman who decided to return to the village after long wanderings across the country with expeditions. Where hadn't he been? With geologists and surveyors. The Camishan gossips chewed over it for almost a month, discussing the unheard of. Michael's mother had simply run off with another man, leaving her son with his father. When fathers abandon children, that's one thing, but a mother? It's incomprehensible. That was their unanimous verdict. What kind of passion came over her? Her husband is almost non-drinking, hard-working, calm, saved money, not a lot, but enough for repairs on the old house and furniture. He has a car, even if it's not new. In short, a desirable bachelor. He won't be alone for long, especially since his son is already grown, soon going into the army. There's nothing for him to do here in the village. As soon as Sarah saw Michael, she immediately knew. This was fate. Something special. The most important thing in life. She hadn't dated anyone, hadn't even thought about boys. She was still just a child. But then she saw him, and that was it. Most boys at that age were awkward, gangly, but he was well-built, strong. He walked into the classroom behind the principal, looked up, and his first glance fell directly on Sarah. They looked at each other for several long moments, and Sarah understood. He liked her. Words weren't needed. Sarah's mother, Lucy, studied in the district center and married a newcomer from the North Caucasus there. For the first few years, while renting accommodation, they lived well. Sarah was born. And then they went to her husband's homeland, and there he seemed to change completely. Among his own people, he became different. Her mother recounted. He was terribly jealous, started acting like something else entirely, said things like, "A woman must know her place." And the mother-in-law there, You had to respect and endure until you became one yourself. At home, my relatives would stand up for me. But there I was a stranger, alone. I endured for a while. It was scary to divorce with little you. But I decided and left for home. If it had been a son, maybe he wouldn't have given him up. He would have sued. But he let you go easily. Upon returning, her mother Lucy got a job at the post office. Sarah remembered this post office from her earliest childhood, constantly hanging around there after school, knowing every corner like her own home. After her mother's death, Sarah was given her job. It seemed natural to everyone. Who else? Perhaps the post office was Sarah's destiny. But then, in her youth, she was sure. Her destiny was Michael. Her mother taught Sarah, a girl should be a little unapproachable, sometimes capricious, not be the first to make up. Let the boy think he's not that important. Let him pursue her. But it was all in vain. Her mother's words flew past Sarah's ears. She was completely unable and unwilling to hide her love for Michael. He apparently liked it and quickly got used to it. They never even really argued once. Sarah easily gave in. Everything seemed unimportant compared to the happiness of being near him. The first school year flew by in an instant, and Michael left for the district center to study auto mechanics. Sarah visited him every weekend, if he couldn't or didn't want to come himself. More often than not, he didn't want to. "Your father misses you. You should visit him," she said. "You haven't been home for 2 months. He gets me drunk after every trip I make to see you. I even promised him I'd come and tell him about you. Last time he asked if you'd hurt me in any way. I think he was hinting that I was jealous of him and Susan." "Tell him I'm grown up. I have my own life here," Michael replied. "Let him live with Susan. I don't mind. He shouldn't spend his life alone. And I'm not planning to stay in the village after school and the army." Sarah, in her naivety, thought that when Michael spoke of himself, he meant her too. After all, they were always together, and it would be that way forever. It never occurred to her to wonder, was there a place for her in his plans for the future? Michael's father, Mr. George, was a little pitied. Although he had found a partner, a son was still a son. Before the army, Michael finally came to his father in Kamyshin. His send-off was held there. He had managed to work in a car service, he was confident, had money. He brought Sarah gifts, a tight blue denim miniskirt and a white t-shirt with palm trees and a beach. She wore them to the send-off. Kamyshin was not a small village, and almost half the population came to see Michael off. Susan, George's girlfriend, and her friends set tables in the garden. She worked as a cook and came up with all sorts of delicious things from the most ordinary products so that everyone would have enough. Michael's friend Gary, an adult already, about 25, also from the car service, came from the district center. Sarah danced 2 slow dances with him, and Michael was seriously offended. But by evening, he apparently got tired of pretending to be jealous, and they ran off together to the river, where local fishermen had built a cozy little house. Usually, a group gathered there with kebabs and drinks, and at dawn, they went fishing. That evening the house was empty, and sheltered only the 2 of them until morning. It seemed to Sarah to be a good omen. It meant they would soon have their own home too. They just had to wait. She didn't tell Michael about it. For some reason she was shy. And then the waiting began. The first month seemed endless, and a little later, Sarah realized they were going to have a child. She immediately wrote to Michael. The answer came quickly, and Sarah understood with chilling clarity. The child would be hers alone. Michael wrote that he hadn't planned any children until he was on his feet. He had no home, no money, and she had let him down, like a child. If Sarah wanted to be with him, the problem needed to be solved. "It's nothing serious. There's still time to fix everything. Write when you decide. Kiss. Bye." Sarah stopped writing. She hadn't decided anything, and Michael didn't get in touch again. 2 months later, her mother died of a sudden, severe illness, and grief overshadowed everything else for a while. Her mother had hidden her illness until the end, not wanting to scare Sarah, as the doctors had given no hope. The funeral and memorial service passed. Neighbors and friends helped. Sarah lived as if in a fog, not even noticing that her condition was already visible to everyone. Mr. George came, coughed for a long time, fidgeted, then asked, "Sarah, can I be direct? Does Mike know?" "He knows. He knows and doesn't want it. He asked me to solve the problem," Sarah replied dryly. "I'll write to that puppy, that," Mr. George exclaimed in frustration. "And don't you think I have no doubt that he's the father? Not even a thought otherwise." But Michael gave his father the same answer. He, you see, hadn't planned anything like that, and he couldn't be disregarded, presented with a fait accompli. He wasn't planning to get married, at least not until he was 30. He wanted to see the world. Life, he said, had changed, opportunities had arisen, and he had already arranged where he would go to work after the army. So there was no point waiting for him in Kamishin. It pained Sarah to look at Mr. George when he brought the letter to show her. He stood on the threshold, hesitant to enter, and couldn't utter a word. "Mr. George, don't panic prematurely." Sarah tried to comfort him, and herself at the same time. "Maybe he'll change his mind? He's just in shock from the unexpected news." "I'll help when the baby is born," Mr. George promised and hurried out. Sarah clung to this hope. It was easier that way. When her son was born, she named him after Michael. Michael remained silent. Granddad George, however, helped at first. He bought a stroller, a crib, a little snowsuit. Sarah received a single mother's allowance. She simply couldn't bring herself to demand recognition and alimony from Michael. It seemed humiliating to her. Then Mr. George found a new job and moved beyond the Urals with Susan. He stayed there, settled down. Sometimes he sent small sums for Tom's birthday and New Year. Sarah gradually gave them to Tom as pocket money, but in the last couple of years, the money came less often and in smaller amounts. George had retired, no longer went on expeditions. "Does George know that his son is no longer alive?" "He's already been informed, without you." Nancy put her hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Don't open old wounds. It's not your place to comfort him. You've been strangers for a long time, fate separated you. And forgive my bluntness, but your Michael has now seen the world. For some reason, people think that if you live only for yourself, for your own convenience, happiness will just come your way. Not at all. And he's gone." Nancy is right, of course. Her tongue felt numb. It was hard to move. "Time to go home. Tom is coming for the holidays tomorrow. She wanted to cook something tasty in the evening. Now she'll have to get up at the crack of dawn." Sarah woke up to the bright sun in the window. Tom was already home. She jumped out of bed, throwing on an old robe over her pajamas. She felt ashamed in front of her son. She had never met him looking like this before. She had to explain everything. He would understand. He was grown up now. "Mom, I know everything. Calm down." Tom interrupted her rambling, hurried story. "Don't worry about me. I don't feel anything. For me, he just didn't exist. And the last thing we need is for you to start drinking over this." "I just yesterday, son, just once. It doesn't mean I'm—" Sarah faltered. "It's okay. Nothing has hurt for a long time." Sarah shook her head. "That person was once important to me, so we commemorated him with Nancy. Let's talk about something good instead. You said you're getting a suit and shoes for graduation?" "Yes. Timmy's mom brings things from Poland. She promised to find something for the right amount," Tom replied. "I warned her not to spend more. I don't want you to go into debt, and I haven't earned anything myself yet." Sarah forcefully cracked the eggs into a bowl for the pie. "Good boy," she sighed. "That's right. We don't need debts. We can't pay them back. I just don't know what I'll wear myself to your graduation." "Mom, can I ask you something?" Tom suddenly hesitated and asked abruptly, without looking at her. "Of course." Sarah became anxious. "Just don't scare me, you're too serious." "No, nothing happened, it's just, Don't come to graduation, okay? Tom spoke faster. It'll be easier for you. You won't have to worry about an outfit and all that. What? Why? Sarah froze. It's such a day, once in a lifetime, like a wedding. I'll look at you and be proud of how you've grown. You'll leave to study, to work, and I'll remember you as I see you that day. You don't understand me, Thomas, Sarah laughed, trying to hide the pain. Every day is the same for me, so even ceremonial nonsense will do. Silence fell. Tom hesitated, choosing his words, and finally blurted out in the same tense, abrupt voice. Mom, please don't be offended. There are other celebrations here, where everyone knows you and no one will stare and judge by your clothes. You're used to living like this and probably don't notice how poorly we live, and how much it stands out to others. I never told you, but after meetings, all they talk about is what parents came in, what they came in. It drives me crazy. You studied here in the village where everyone was the same. You can't understand this. No matter what I achieve, they'll always call me the homeless woman's son. I fought because of that. Remember how the class teacher complained about my behavior? She was surprised. Such a capable student, such grades, and suddenly such behavior. Tom twisted his lips, mimicking the teacher. I couldn't explain it to her. Do you think Sarah replied evenly, as if she hadn't heard his words. Are you ashamed of me? Do you feel sorry that you got such a poor mother? That yours is worse than everyone else's? Mom, don't make things complicated, Tom was almost shouting. I'm not ashamed of you, but of our poverty. Don't make me a monster. People see not you, but your worn-out sandals and old dresses. There are enough freaks like that. You can't prove anything to them. I just don't want to see their smirks. And why would you want that? To have them look at you like that? Okay, if you don't want me to, I won't go. Sarah turned away and began forcefully whisking the pie batter. At least it's true. I'll save money, on the trip and everything. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. Tom quickly, awkwardly hugged her shoulders and rushed out the door. I'll stop by Andy's. I'll be back before lunch. Sarah wanted to scream, to burst into tears, to cry out all this pain, but she continued quickly, almost mechanically, whisking the batter, greasing the baking sheet, peeling apples. Tears wouldn't come, as if something inside had dried up, burned out. She put the pie in the oven, went out into the hallway, forced herself to look up and see her reflection in the mirror. It was okay, not completely hopeless, and there was no need to pity herself. Her son was still a child not long ago. She couldn't demand from him like an adult. And the worn-out sandals, they weren't glued on. There would be new ones. Tomorrow is New Year's. She needed to make a good wish at midnight, not just for Tom, and for herself too. For the first time in a long time, looking into her own eyes in the mirror, she repeated, and for myself too. Yes, Tom, I really think we need to go see your mother, and I think it's better to meet before the wedding, not after. You know how important relationships with parents are to me, and it's time for you to mend yours too. If you've suddenly decided you've gotten involved with a bore and a bossy woman, you still have time to change your mind and solemnly break off our engagement. Julia was by no means a bore or a bossy woman, but she knew how to combine humor and seriousness in one phrase. She was never boring. She took many things lightly, but sometimes showed an unexpected principledness for Thomas. When it became clear that their relationship wasn't just a fleeting romance, she wanted to know everything about him. And what interested her was precisely what Thomas preferred to keep silent about with girls. The light-hearted, teasing Julia was actually very serious about family ties and was incredibly close to her parents, and that didn't mean blind obedience at all. And why do you never talk about your childhood, about your parents? Julia asked, as if casually, but a sly glint sparkled in her eyes. You didn't grow up in an incubator where they clone software developers, did you? Well, you almost guessed it. Thomas grinned, trying to hide his awkwardness. I studied in a boarding school. They often called them incubators back then, like orphanages. I don't know about now. I'm from a village, Julia. Wow, what a confession, Julia laughed. Do you think that's the most terrible fact of your biography? That's it. You can't get out of it now. The skeleton's out. And you know, it's beautiful. Not like in those silly paperback books. She took his arm, slowed her pace, letting him know she was ready to listen. Since he had finally decided to get married by the age of 30, his bride should know the real him, not the legend he told casual acquaintances. As Thomas expected, the story about his mother surprised Julia the most. 15 years without seeing your mom? Are you out of your mind? And the money? You send her money, don't you? I've been sending it since I started earning enough to not just survive, Thomas explained. She refused a few times, says she has enough, but she's just not used to spending on herself. She's more used to saving. We call on holidays and just because. I've never heard reproaches like, I miss you and you're not coming. I've invited her to visit in Moscow several times, but she never gets around to it. There are always some excuses. And I'm not ready to spend my vacation going to the village. You don't understand. Julia shook her head. You're not going to the village, you're going to your mom. To your mom personally. She suddenly brightened. Oh, let's go together before the wedding. I think your mom and I will become friends. I have no doubt about that, Thomas quickly agreed, although he wasn't sure about anything. He hadn't had a heart-to-heart talk with his mother in so long, just routine phrases on the phone. He didn't know himself if she was still the person he remembered or had become completely different. He simply hadn't had time to think about it. He was building his life. We still have a whole month to choose a gift for your mom, Julia interrupted his thoughts, putting Thomas in a quandary. What would make her happy? He seemed to remember giving his mother something a very long time ago, with his first salary as a night watchman during his first year of university. He suddenly remembered how she always carried a worn faux leather handbag that she had already dyed twice. He felt unbearable shame. Before the trip, he simply bought a new one at the mall, not the most expensive, but leather, from a decent store. He arrived with 2 huge sports bags packed with groceries and immediately pulled a glossy bag out of one. Here, this is for you, he said. Wow! His mother laughed cheerfully. Now I'm the most fashionable girl in Kamishin. She immediately transferred her wallet, handkerchiefs, cosmetic bag into the new handbag, slung it over her shoulder, and went into the hallway to twirl in front of the mirror. Thomas sat at the table, watching her and thinking condescendingly how little was needed for her happiness. At that moment, there was a gentle knock on the door. Come in, his mother called out in a melodious, almost girlish voice. A bearded, red-haired man entered, resembling a Viking from fantasy. He smiled quietly, stopped a couple of steps from the threshold, looking at his mother. Then he noticed Thomas at the table. His mother quickly shifted her gaze from one to the other. Oh, hi, Nick. Come in, sit down. Meet my son, Thomas. Tom, this is Nick. He worked with Granddad George on an expedition, a surveyor. I told you about your grandfather's. Came to visit my father on vacation, and a greeting from your grandfather for you too. Homemade honey, Nick clarified, entering the room and nodding towards the 3-liter jar of dark amber honey that Thomas had noticed on the old sideboard as soon as he entered. Glad to meet you, Thomas. My father also has an apiary, like your grandfather's in his new place. He extended a broad tanned hand to Thomas. Thomas shook it silently, not wanting to seem impolite. Came to visit your father on vacation. Spend time with your father, Thomas thought. It was almost 20 kilometers to Kolmi, the village on the highway. He should have stopped in the district center to understand. The red-haired surveyor clearly wasn't just passing through Kamishin, but was frequenting their house. The guest was apparently intelligent and immediately understood that he had arrived at the wrong time. He didn't even sit down, walked along the window and said, Be well, Sarah, I'll be on my way. You and your son probably have a million important things to talk about. Bye. Bye. His mother nodded, a slight smile playing on her lips, and mysterious sparks danced in her eyes as she watched the guest leave. "What is this Nick doing here?" Thomas asked, barely concealing his irritation, as soon as the surveyor closed the door. Did he want a full vacation with affection and hot meals? He should have gone south then. There's resort service there. His mother came to the table. Half jokingly, half seriously, she hit the tabletop with a small, tired fist. "Son, even though you're grown up and brought gifts, choose your words. I haven't interfered in your life since your graduation, at all." She paused, then added, "By the way, Nick cooks perfectly well himself and doesn't need my watery cabbage soup." Thomas didn't understand why he suddenly remembered that old conversation. Back then, he and his mother didn't even suspect they wouldn't see each other for so many years. On that last visit, Nick didn't appear again, and they never mentioned him. Thomas didn't even know if his mother had a personal life, and he didn't even think to ask. And now, when she was almost 50, it felt awkward to start. In the photos she sometimes sent, his mother looked bright and serene. Was she just good at pretending, or was she really doing well? Thomas hadn't thought about that either, busy with himself, his career, and recently, his personal life. The upcoming trip made him anxious. He even envied Julia. How could she be so happy, as if she was going to a seaside resort? The main thing that worried him was whether her view would change when she saw the conditions he grew up in. For her, rural tourism meant an ethnic village somewhere in Greece or Spain, where the floors didn't sag and dusty bouquets from the 80s didn't hang on the walls. Julia, with her sharp eye, would notice everything and understand. If you dug deep enough into a successful developer from an international company, you'd find a kid in oversized Chinese jackets with an ancient phone who was called the homeless woman's son at school. Well, let whatever happens happen. Constantly running away from himself and not seeing his mother for so many years was simply despicable. Angered at himself, this always worked flawlessly. Thomas called Julia 15 minutes later. "I bought train tickets. There's no airport nearby. It's a long drive from the plane. And the train stops at the station in the next village for only 2 minutes. If we're lucky, we'll jump off. Practice, you have almost a month." His mother flatly refused to accept rejections and promised to meet them at the station. Perhaps she missed traveling, chatting with fellow passengers whom you only meet on the road. When Thomas wrote that he would be coming with his fiancée, a reply message arrived almost immediately. "Wow, how happy I am, waiting at Station Square." "Now that's what I call it," Julia exclaimed, and proudly showed off the gifts for his mother. She had bought wind chimes for the garden, a tablecloth for the gazebo in the same style, and a set of bright ceramic dishes. Thomas had no idea if these were suitable gifts, but he feigned admiration just in case. As usual, he would give money from himself. At Sudakovo Station, Thomas was the first to jump onto the dusty, packed earth. Nothing had changed, except that the wooden station building had been repainted from green to light blue, but otherwise, it was all the same. No one had thought to pave the circular square in front of it. Nothing had grown there for a long time. The station ground seemed forever saturated with 100 years of dust. No trees under the windows, and only at the very end of the square, near an old Neva, a lively, dark-haired woman fluttered out, waved her hand, and shouted loudly, "Tom, hello?" "That's Mom!" Thomas tugged at Julia's sleeve as if waking up. "Let's go. She must have arranged for someone to give us a ride." They hurried towards her, and his mother approached just as quickly. She clasped one hand with the other, extended it to Julia. "Sarah, how was your trip, Julia?" "Thank you, excellent. We were lucky with our fellow passengers," Julia replied cheerfully. "Well, that's great." His mother smiled, stood on tiptoe, hugged Thomas tightly, and kissed him on both cheeks. Such sincere joy shone in her eyes, and she herself exuded something warm, honey-like. She immediately pulled back slightly to look at her son, and he looked at her in surprise. She didn't look old or worn out, almost the same as he remembered, and yet completely different. Slender, in loose blue jeans, a plaid shirt, and a baseball cap, she could pass for his peer if you didn't look closely at the fine network of wrinkles around her eyes and on her forehead. You'd never guess she was 50. Her eyes, bold, lively, young. His mother, as always, voiced her thoughts. How respectable you've become. Our people won't recognize you for sure, and if they do, they'll gasp. If I hadn't seen your photos, I wouldn't have believed it was my son myself. Julia, he hasn't become an arrogant bore, has he? No, not at all, Julia laughed. Then load the luggage into the trunk, son, his mother commanded. Who's driving us? Thomas asked. The driver is me. His mother smiled slyly, noticing his astonishment. Don't be afraid. I'll get you there safe and sound. The roads are quiet in our backwoods, not much skill required. I drive like a real hen carefully. But it's safe, gentlemen. Without waiting for a reply, his mother got into the driver's seat. Julia quietly giggled, glanced at Thomas and whispered, You're about to get to know your mom all over again. His mother didn't keep the intrigue going for long and explained as soon as they got onto the highway. I won't pretend I've become a businesswoman and earned the car myself. My husband bought it. I didn't even want to learn, I was scared. But he persuaded me. At first I trembled behind the wheel, but then it was fine. I got used to it. Mom, why didn't you even tell me you got married? Thomas finally dared to ask, trying not to show his surprise. Well, forgive me, Tom, his mother sighed. My husband said I should tell you, but I kept putting it off. There was no occasion. It won't affect your life in any way. If you suddenly need this house in the backwoods, it's all yours. I don't have other children. I thought you'd come and see everything yourself. And you didn't approve of my choice right away, I remember. What choice? Thomas no longer tried to hide his confusion. I married Nick, his mother said softly. A long time ago. Remember Nick, the surveyor? He worked with Grandad George. He used to come here. The guests and hosts went to bed well past midnight, after 2 o'clock. They decided they wouldn't get any sleep otherwise, and the young people were tired from the journey. The night was clear, as if on demand. They sat in the garden under the huge stars for a long time, at the table covered with the new tablecloth, drinking tea from the samovar, talking. Nick fell asleep quickly. He had been working until late evening. And Sarah lay in the dark, looking at the thin sickle moon in the window and replaying every minute of that day in her memory. Funny, happy. Imagine how many years she and her son hadn't had a heart-to-heart talk. But now everything would be different. Everything was just beginning. No, Tom called every month. He asked how things were, how her health was, work, if she needed money. He heard everything is fine, and said that he was fine too. Sometimes he reported on a new job, a promotion, a new car, buying an apartment, vacation trips. She congratulated him. He thanked her. He invited her to visit, but probably more out of politeness than because he missed her. He had his own life there, in Moscow, at a different pace, by different rules. Many of his city acquaintances probably shouldn't see his village mother from the village post office, so as not to spoil his image. Maybe he had even invented a different biography, a different family, to fit into the world he so longed for. She didn't want to believe such thoughts, and Nick reassured her, said it wasn't like that. He even grumbled, What a proud and stubborn woman you are. I never would have thought it when I got involved with you. You should talk to your son heart to heart, tell him how much you miss him, how proud you are of him, how he achieved everything despite all the difficulties. Tell him about us at least, otherwise it's some kind of ridiculous secret marriage, like in silly novels. Reassure him that you're not counting every penny, that life has improved, otherwise the boy is sending you money, and you're hoarding it, you schemer. Nick playfully wagged his finger at her. Schemers hoard for themselves and I'm saving it for him, Sarah winked. I'm his personal banker. I'll solemnly hand it over at the wedding. That's enough. Nick became serious. You've raised a wonderful boy, he achieved everything himself, and he's probably long forgotten his childhood fears. But you still remember that old hurt, how he was ashamed of you at graduation. But you were an adult then, and you were offended by a silly boy. Usually, Sarah listened to Nick. He was sensible, never rushed into things. But when it came to her son, she couldn't bring herself to cross that line. Sometimes she even regretted telling Nick absolutely everything about herself. She wasn't offended by anyone. Life had simply taught her. Don't impose your love on someone who doesn't need it. Who does perfectly well without you? With Michael, Tom's father, she hadn't understood this. She had followed him like a shadow, breathed his life. But he had never once talked about a future together, about children. He talked about love because girls liked that, and it was convenient for him that Sarah was always there while he lived with his father. She had made it all up herself. She only understood this when Tom left to study, and she was left completely alone. And then, as if by fate, Nick appeared. Life had turned out completely differently. Nick, due to his job, had traveled half the country, but he tried to visit his father in Colmy every year. He didn't plan to settle in the village until retirement. He was afraid he would wither away from boredom and idleness. He thought maybe his son would settle down when he remarried. But 10 years had passed since Nick's first, short-lived marriage, and there was no talk of a new attempt. He divorced after 3 years. He went on an expedition to the north, and his wife went to her mother and stayed there, meeting the owner of a shoe store. She and her mother decided it was the best option. Nick wasn't offended. He only blamed himself. He was captivated by her appearance, didn't see how different they were. Gradually, he got used to this nomadic, bachelor life. He didn't feel deprived. On the contrary, always new places, new interesting people. One day, on an expedition, he met an older drilling foreman. They started talking, found out they were from the same area, villages 20 kilometers apart. They chatted about fishing, mutual acquaintances, and talking more, shared their stories. His fellow countryman, George, told him about his family, about the wife who ran away, about his son, selfish and useless, and about the failed daughter-in-law and grandson. From that evening on, they became friends, despite the age difference. George retired and with his partner took up beekeeping. And when Nick was preparing for his next vacation to his father, George sent Sarah, his daughter-in-law, a jar of honey along with a thin envelope. "Let it sweeten the girl's life," he said. Sarah greeted the guest so warmly, as if they had known each other for 100 years. After 10 minutes of conversation, it seemed as if they had. Nick discreetly looked around her house. Everything spoke of poverty. Of such houses, people say, clean but poor. They would probably say the same of the hostess. But despite this, there was no sense of bleak despair in Sarah's house. On the contrary, it was cozy. Nick was amazed and kept thinking about this meeting all evening. No, the poverty didn't surprise him. He had seen much worse and much dirtier dwellings on expeditions. Something else was surprising: how such a beautiful woman lived in such surroundings and didn't wither. And the next evening, he found himself near her house again and knocked on the door. "Nick, come in. Did you forget to give me something?" "No, everything's fine," Nick replied. "I just thought maybe you need help around the house, like build or take down a shed." "Did Mr. George ask you? How cheeky, asking someone to spend their vacation on free labor." Sarah smiled. "No, this is my own personal cheeky initiative," Nick smiled back. "Think about what needs to be done." And Sarah suddenly felt flustered. Nick understood. She wasn't used to being helped. More often, she helped others herself. A spark of distrust flickered in her eyes. It wouldn't be easy with her, but he had already decided. The game was worth the candle. Sarah couldn't believe for a long time that it wasn't a joke, not another self-deception. What could this man want from her? Maybe just a few meetings to brighten his vacation. And for her, it probably wouldn't be bad. Many women liked such light romances. But she was afraid it wouldn't work out that way for her, that she would get attached, then foolishly miss him and wait for something. And that's what would happen with Nick. She liked him too much. It was better not to disturb her usual way of life. "You're a coward, Sarah." Nancy didn't hold back, she even swore. "I never would have thought you were such a scaredy cat and thought so little of yourself. It's obvious to the naked eye that the man is decent and serious. And listen to what I found out. One of our regular lunch customers, a logger, goes fishing with Nick's father. Recently, his father was bragging that Nick is thinking of staying, settling down, expanding the apiary, starting a legal honey business. He saved money up north while he was on expeditions, and now he's decided to settle down. There you have it." "So what? What does that have to do with me?" Sarah pretended not to understand. "Don't pretend to be stupid," Nancy hissed like a kettle. "Tom didn't like him," Sarah gave the last reason. "Tom isn't the one who has to live with him." Nancy became very strict. "Believe me, Tom doesn't understand everything yet. He needs time, he needs to grow up, make his own mistakes. Then maybe you'll speak the same language. But now, listen to your heart, your intuition. Take a risk, Sarita. You have my word on it." Sarah could no longer argue, and she noticed, the more she resisted, the more she looked for excuses, the more persistently Nick made it clear that he was serious. At their modest wedding, Nancy was the witness. Who else would be? "And then you and your husband raised this apiary together?" Julia asked. "Yep," Sarah laughed cheerfully. "That only happens in movies. You're crying on an icy bus, and in the next shot, you're in a Mercedes and a cover girl. We struggled so much with this apiary that we're surprised we didn't give up. I won't even talk about the bees and all the nuances. You probably wouldn't be interested. And the paperwork. How much paperwork you need to sell honey legally. It was a nightmare for beginners. Tests, certificates, passports. I was ready to panic, but Nick is so calm, nothing phases him. It took us a long time to recoup the costs, but now our honey is known in several districts. It's time to expand. We have more experience, it should be easier. I'm sure everything will work out with Nick." "You're simply incredible." Julia looked at Sarah with admiration, taking advantage of the pause. "Now I know exactly where Tom gets his character from." "Oh, Julia, please!" Sarah waved her hand. "Tom achieved a lot himself. At his age, I was counting pennies. I couldn't even provide for him so he wouldn't feel worse than others. I would have stayed at the post office for pennies if it weren't for Nick. So the compliment is misplaced. I know myself." "I'm not flattering you," Julia countered. "You wrongly think that character is only shown in a career. I'm not 30 yet, and I see so many people my age, embittered, disappointed. They had everything. Their parents provided for them while they were studying, while they were getting on their feet. They don't have children, or they didn't have to raise them alone. Many of them wouldn't have endured 1/100th of what you went through and not become embittered. I felt uneasy when I realized how Tom treated you, and you welcomed him so warmly. 15 years, only money instead of attention, formal calls on holidays. Everything was boiling inside me, but I didn't want to spoil your joy of meeting him." "Can I ask you something?" Sarah interrupted her. "Don't, Julia. It's hard enough for him now. I see he understands everything himself. We'll mend our relationship. I'm also to blame. I didn't tell him about my life, about getting married, and I took the money, although I no longer needed it. By the way, while our beekeepers aren't back yet, take this envelope. It will be useful for the wedding." Mother-in-law rejecting a gift? Let's seal our friendship with a woman's secret.